Thank you for deliberating with me the choice book in this presentation of Joshua Green. His book is called Moral Tribes, and this is for the Graduate Leadership Studies course, Ethical Leadership for Civil Society, Civic Engagement, and Corporate Responsibility. So, Joshua Green presents a resolution in this book of his perception of an ethical dilemma in need of resolution. He believes that there's an us versus them problem and it requires societal resolution. However, I would argue from a theological standpoint that the world is not as it was when created in perfection. Until the inherent difficulty of sin, malice, and death are resolved with the second coming of Jesus Christ, people who have chosen to grow on the trajectory of holiness and purity should have the choice to remain separate from those choosing to exist willfully in sin. Therefore, his postulation of recognizing and seeking to change the structure of, air quotes, moral tribes is situated on the assumption that he's right in his assertion that everyone should be forced to share morality together regardless of the spiritual implications of their individual life choices. I would argue that a man reaps what he sows and should therefore choose wisely because life circumstances, including relationships, are rewarded or consequential according to these choices. The purpose of this book is to resolve a gap between people. However, there's no consideration of consent pertaining to whether or not these people have purposefully chosen to be together or be separate. The societal gap between persons articulated by Joshua Green as a perceptible, air quotes, us versus them gap is often articulated as a concern amongst people seeking acceptance. Unfortunately, the analysis of the subject matter does not consider the decision that choosing inclusion is a moral choice. So I'm asserting the basic nature of cats, whom are selective by nature in their social choices. So for cats, social choices are a matter of survival. Their selective nature, unfortunately, though, elicits violence by those whom the cats have not chosen. By contrast, dogs very much want to be social. They want to be included with the cats. But we already know this does not resolve amicably. The dog would have written this book. The concern with many of the ideological positions postulated in moral tribes is, like, at first the tonality is just an assumptive that everyone should be together and we should be, trying to find a way to basically force people together with no distinction. And then Joshua Green discusses utilitarianism in a tonality that almost seems inclined to force people to accept whatever he postulates is an ideal social or sociological position. He at no point postulates choice. It's a concern. At one point, the author came up with what he postulated as a splendid idea. He even named a chapter a splendid idea. And my own leadership practice involves preparation for political leadership in Haitian government. So this year, I just graduated with a 4-year degree in political science, a BA from the school, Vermont State University. And this education specifically is intended to benefit the Haitian people. So, contextualizing this truth, I'm cognizant of this fact. Haiti has a rich and diverse array of natural resources, but today we're going to talk about one. This nation at this juncture is at war, And the causes have to be resolved before the natural resources can be utilized for economic prosperity. So there's a question about why this conflict is raging on, and it's prohibitive to the Haitian people benefiting economically. One of the rich, abundant, and highly in-demand natural resources exclusive to Haiti in such abundance is sugar. Today, the entire world is paying too much for sugar, and this means that the wealthiest Western Vermont, everyone's paying way too much to import sugar. And Haiti has this natural resource in abundance. This is a wonderful, mutually beneficial economic relationship that can't be fully realized until the conflict in Haiti is no longer so prevalent. In America, just so happens we have an artificial sweetener that goes by the name of Splenda, and it would supplant natural sugar if it could. But people will always prefer natural sugar. It's not even close. Natural sugar is always better. And in fact, Splenda wouldn't even have a market if the world could import more natural sugar at a better rate. And Haiti has this. So in response to the splendid idea of the author Joshua Green, he says, and I quote, "How can we, the herders of the new pastures, resolve our difference? How can we avert the tragedy of common sense morality?" That's the problem we're trying to solve, and we're now ready to start thinking about solutions. My question is, who is we? He continues his assertion by indicating, if we are to avert the tragedy of common sense morality, we're going to have to find our own unnatural solution, what I've called meta-morality, a higher level moral system that adjudicates among competing tribal moralities, just as a tribe's morality adjudicates among competing individuals. End quote. That was Joshua Green. This is me. These assumptions are so blindly focused on the belief that his own assertions of societal cohesion, togetherness, are correct that he does not consider there's a demographic that wants nothing to do with any of it. Furthermore, the postulations of meta-morality are situated as a higher level of thought, but it's a deliberate thought system. It's based on his own assumptions. So many would, like I would, assert the wisdom of God as presented in theological writings to be greater. So based on the assertions we've analyzed, an honest and intentional assessment of whether or not there's actually a real problem affecting the entirety of a society must precipitate the consensual resolution of such a problem. Faking problems does happen, especially when there are valuable assets to be gained from ongoing problems. At this juncture, the author Joshua Green has presented an elaborate discourse in resolution of a problem postulated as resolving a societal gap in the air quotes us versus them. But he has not taken into account some people may prefer the societal gap. In some cases, we could just call it independence. I suggested the analogy for deliberation of cats versus dogs because forcing cats to commune with dogs does not solve a problem. It creates a problem that did not exist before. Proper resolutions to the purported concern should be precipitated by deliberative inquiry. It's really not possible to guess. And we discussed in this Leadership Studies Graduate Studies course repeatedly the appreciative inquiry method, which is not, proliferated throughout leadership. It's maybe a modern method of thought, and it's just not popular yet, but it's brilliant in that it situates leadership with the precipitating step of asking the people you intend to lead like, what is the problem? And then listening to their contributions, and then listening to their talents, and then utilizing the talents that are already there instead of I have a splendid idea, this is my idea, I'm going to put it on you. That appreciative inquiry is encouraged in this academic graduate studies course degree program, basically, because if you're not asking questions, nothing else matters. You really can't lead. So a communicative inquiry into the aspects of society considered for force cohesion must ask if there's an actual problem. This is democracy and implementation for a peaceful society. It's important to ascertain if there's an authentic problem as a precursor to asserting solutions. Otherwise, the solutions will fail. Littlle, who writes on pragmatic leadership, actually has some positions that are brilliant. And Littlle says if practices evolve to solve problems, there has to be a way to determine whether the solutions they propose truly solve or at least ameliorate the problems they're designed to solve. This is a matter of governance. End quote. Littlle. Because Joshua Green lacks comprehensive authenticity as it pertains to his assessment of the problem, it's reasonable to ascertain he would not provide a mechanism for asserting that his assessment was wrong. The dog will not stop himself from pursuing the cat for cohesive unity. Air quotes. If the dog could reason, he would simply assert another, air quotes, reason to be with the cat, even if the cat doesn't want to be with him. So our coursework textbook author Littlle does suggest a pragmatic method of reasoning to truthfully ascertain if societal cohesion should be required, and FYI, it shouldn't. This deliberative process begins with an honest inquiry and it ends with an honest inquiry. So Littlle asks, what is the end of inquiry? Inquiries make claims about the subject of the inquiry as a result of the inquiry. The end, however, is not just to make claims, but to assert the claims are true. Of course, how to determine whether a claim is true is a difficult question, but that does not detract from its aim. It would be strange to say the goal of inquiry is to produce false claims unless the inquiry is a pretense. The aim of truth is implicit in the practice of inquiry. So when Littlle is asking what is the end of inquiry, the presumptive is that, like you're inquiring to solve a problem with an end goal. And often if the intentions are not pure, as with, the situation I stipulated with, with Haitian government, and just the ongoing conflict preventing sugar from entering the market when sugar is preferable, and Splenda having a market in artificial sweetener so long as Haiti is in conflict. As long as involvement benefits from the problem, there's no inclination to actually solve the problem. So Littlle is cutting right to the chase and saying, what is the end of inquiry? And I'm actually surprised with the honesty of Littlle in saying, is the inquiry a pretense? Because if you don't have an end game, if you don't have any sort of resolution, it's a reason to question the entire process. So finally, the arguments articulated by Joshua Green within the context of utilitarianism are, again, situated on the presumption that his moral reasoning is right for everyone. Even worse, if his utilitarian perspectives were enforced on a societal level, the outcome could bear resemblance to a miserable dictatorship or communism. Joshua Green sets forth an ideological premise articulated in favor of requiring strangers to help strangers. Like, what could go wrong? if you require strangers to help strangers. When an ideological premise situated on morality becomes an enforced practice, it's no longer moral because it's not a deliberative choice. Yet Joshua Green argues it should be an aspect of utilitarianism demands. Air quotes, like specifically his quote is, "Still, one might object to the moderate reform that real-world utilitarianism demands. Helping strangers, one might say, is admirable, but entirely optional." Is that a defensible moral stance or just a comfortable rationalization? End quote. I say a defensible moral stance is a choice discernible only by an inquiry preceding deliberation of the problem. So just like we can ascertain whether or not you're sincere in wanting to resolve the problem by actually having an end game in sight, if you're asking before you even get involved, this could also be a metric to determine, the authenticity of your intentions. Forced problem solving, including the purported resolution described in Moral Tribes, should be precipitated by an authentic inquiry into the deliberative choices of the participants. Thank you for taking the time to think about this. Our entire class should be optimistic about being strong, well-educated, and good leaders going forward. So I hope that some of this presentation, some of this discussion is cause for deliberative thought, or maybe even a change in methods. My references for this presentation, this choice book presentation, was, of course, Joshua Green, and his book is entitled Moral Tribes, Emotion, Reason, and the Gap Between Us and Them. Additionally, I used one of the textbooks that are required for this graduate studies, leadership studies course, and this was Jacob Littlle. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to responding to your responses.